So how many of you have wanted to be over the rainbow in the last year? I think all of us have. It's been a tough year. And you know what? Being human is tough, isn't it? Being human, it can be tough because we can't be just human. It's impossible. As hard as we try, we can never be just human because we have divine inheritance. We're made of divinity. And as hard as we try when we want to be human, if we stay there, we'll feel unfulfilled, we'll feel separate, we'll feel apart from life, we won't feel connected to things all the time. Sure, there'll be little glimpses of it, because we can let our divinity lie dormant within us. Because our divinity, I mean, we're filled with divinity, of course, but the spark of it is in our heart. And it wants to be opened. It wants to be opened. That's why it's here. That divinity's in us because it wants to be open and be creative and be expressed and be cooperated with and understood. But you know what? We just hold it down until we can't hold it down anymore. God created the world and everything in it because it had to create. If it didn't create, God would implode. The same with us. We have that same creativity in us, that same need to express our divinity within us. Now we can express it as love, as kindness, as caring, as forgiveness, as understanding, and as divine imagination. And the song we just heard was about a young girl, Dorothy, who was living in a bleak, well, her perception of reality was very bleak and limited, and her world was sepia tones, if you remember the movie. She was in sepia tones until she broke out of her confinement in her humanity and stepped into that world of imagination and the vividness of creativity, and the colors came up. And Ernest Holmes continually talks about God being colorful, the creative energy of that color of life. And once she tapped into her divine imagination, she came back and looked at her world in a whole new way. Remember when she went home and woke up and she saw everybody with new eyes in a new way? And that's the possibility we have within us. That is what I believe is seeing beyond the veil. To be able to have new eyes and a new expression of life when we can see things and understand them differently. You know, truly awakened consciousness that the mystics describe or we hear about is when we truly understand our unity with the whole. God's unity holds us all together. And unity is the base of everything. So that's what when we say see beyond, that's seeing beyond this limited human perception, that we can see there's so much more at work in our life. When we understand that there's not a line between spirit and matter, they're the same thing. They're made of the same stuff. Matter is just spirit in form. When we can understand that, our whole life will change. But the problem is, and I think you said it so well, Em, these veils of illusion of what we think are reality cover our consciousness and weigh us down. And we start looking for reality in the human world when actually the reality comes from the truth of understanding what life is all about. We can look at the news, and the news tells us about the pain of life, the things that are wrong, the things that hurt, and how many of us, we all at some time or another have gotten so wound up in listening to the news that all we see is the pain in life. We get so tangled up in fear that it overtakes us. And so here we are, these spiritual beings housed in this human body, and we're trying to find the truth, but we're so tangled up in limitation and in an illusion of what reality is. There's something so much more that wants to be revealed. But And again, I think you were reading so well about that, Em, about we get really weighted down in our own darkness, our own shadow, our own unwillingness to speak our truth, to bring our human frailties, which, do you have them? Because I certainly do. Bring the human frailties to light and be honest about them. Because we all have them. They aren't the same, but we all have frailties. That's part of our experience here. And if we can bring them to light, then we can lift that veil of all the things we've held down and tried to hide in our life. We've been in denial. No, that's not me. That's not me. Well, it is me. And we can hold it and recognize it together and heal and lift together. You know, in 1901, a Canadian psychiatrist wrote a book called Cosmic Consciousness, The Evolution of the Human Mind. Richard Buck. And Ernest Holmes speaks of him in his Science of Mind book, and he talks about the cosmic consciousness. And what Buck did, Dr. Buck, is he took 36 individuals, human individuals, that he thought had really reached cosmic consciousness, which is that understanding the oneness of all life. And he studied them. From the historical standpoint, he studied, Buddha and Moses and Jesus and Dante and the 18th century Swedish philosopher Swedenborg. And he studied them along with some contemporaries at that time to find out what are the qualities and experiences of those that have reached cosmic consciousness. And just tell me if you'd like to have this kind of consciousness. He said they all lived in joyfulness. They all found meaning and purpose in life. They embraced their immortality. They knew this wasn't it. There was something more going on. They had no fear of death. And he said there was an absence of the concept of sin. You see, we can be real human beings, spiritually human beings, if we don't believe in sin. We're not sinners. We're learners. We're experiencers. Is that a word? No. We experience life. And when you realize that, your life can be so much lighter and we can understand so much more. We have to start living at a higher frequency. There's a story of Saint Raphael Arnez, and he was an oblate in the Trappist monastery in Banos, Spain during the Spanish Civil War. He died at age 27 in 1938. But in his memoirs, he tells a story which I think all of us can relate to. It's about, he calls it, one of the temptations that comes from those little red devils that live in your mind. Those little beings of negativity that pull us down. And he said he went to it was one day, and he said it was a cold place. It was one of the outbuildings of the monastery. And what was brought to him was a knife, a big old basket of root vegetables. And his assignment was to peel all the turnips. And he stood there with the knife and the turnip, and he goes, I left my home, my family, my study of architecture, my freedom, to be peeling turnips? I must be crazy. And he stood there in this confusion and the temptation we all have to push away the things that seem mundane in this life, the things that seem the ritual of things we need to do. And he's just standing there looking at it, and all of a sudden his heart went wild and gave him an answer. And it said, I'm doing this for love. I'm doing this for the love of Jesus and the love of God. And he said he went back to that task of peeling the turnips, and he felt at peace. He felt on purpose. And isn't that just lifting the veil of understanding? I mean, in our own lives, how often do we get in the routine of just trying to take care of ourselves? And it seems a little harder the older we get. The more vitamins we have to take, the more things we have to do. The more things we have to do to take care of ourselves. And if we just did it understanding we're taking care of a child of God, if we are here doing something that matters to us in this world. Maybe we're peeling turnips, but more likely we're just taking care of our daily business. And we just lift that veil of thinking there's something wrong with what we're doing, that there's not joy in what we do. No, it's the way we approach it. It's how we look at something that determines the quality and the understanding of that. We can change our minds at any point of what we are doing. Dr. Burke went on to say that he highlights the importance of light. And he said all people, or most all people that have reached that cosmic consciousness, the unity of life, say that they felt immersed in light. They felt like they were immersed in the quality, the vibrancy, the aliveness of spirit. And so it's so important for us to turn on the light of our own being. You know, we've all had touches of that spark, that inspiration that comes to us. Ernest Holmes says, when a great thought springs up in the mind of an individual, a great poem is written, a great work of art is created, a new thought is born, which happens to all of us. It's simply a sign that the veil is thin between, and we have caught a glimpse of reality, a glimpse of that creative potentiality that lives in everything. Yesterday we had a memorial service, and actually it's the first time we've really used our inside room in a long time. And it was a young woman who just found us on the internet, and she was in her 20s, and she touched me deeply. She was doing a memorial for her mom. Her mom had gotten brain cancer, and it was that fast-growing cancer. She said there were no stages. She was diagnosed, and 2 months later, she was gone. And she said she said, I think once I've been to a memorial service, so I really don't know what to do. She said, I've never even planned a birthday party. So I don't really know how to do this. And so we sat there, and I said, well, tell me about your mom. And so she told me about her mother, who was an amazing person. I know Gretchen, Elliott, Kirk, and myself heard the sharing of this woman. Kindness, caring, understanding. It was just amazing. But the daughter said, you know, no matter what was presented to her, no matter what hardship, and she had many, she always found a way. She always found a way. And I said, use that to create this service, this celebration of life that fills your soul, and let your mom help you. And it was a beautiful service she did. She did so much of it on her own. And it was such a creative, beautiful time. And it was that inspiration that every pain has that solution, that possibility built in it for us to tap into, that it's there, but we must make space for spirit. We must concentrate on that opening in our heart, that we can tap into that creative energy of God, that understanding of God, the knowing, the forward moving, the evolution of spirit. We need to create the way. Ernest Holmes says daily we should court the divine presence. We should build a relationship with it in whatever way works for us. If it's writing, if it's singing, if it's being in nature, if it's talking to friends, whatever it is, to court that divine presence. He said, and find a time every day to enter into the silence and listen. If we enter into the silence, it will speak to us. It will share with us. It will open itself to us to find the answer. When Ernest Holmes was giving, when he was giving a dedication at the Whittier Church for its opening, he was speaking in one of his amazing ways. He was so beautiful, and always had his arms around everybody he was speaking to. That was so important. And he stopped at one place, and this was in 1959. And it was a time when he, in public, pierced the veil. I'm sure he did it because he meditated for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, every day. But there, in the church at that time, he simply said, I see it. Oh God, the veil is thin between. It's thin between. We do mingle with the hosts of heaven. I see it, and I shall speak of it no more. And he never again spoke in public about that experience, even though I'm sure he had many others of them on his own. But it was a way to know that we have that ability to open to something greater. One of my dear boyfriends, Hafez, from the 13th century, a little later than Rumi, but he said, it is our destiny. It is our destiny to turn into light itself. So what I want you to do today is to just leave here feeling more enlightened, feeling more alive, more creative, because you've chosen to do so. Your life may be exactly the same, but just as Dorothy, you can see it with different eyes and know there's something you can do to lift things up in your own life, and then, ask, am I being the light for myself? But then ask, am I being the light for others? Because it is our responsibility to shine, to be the goodness, and just as Janet said, Reverend Janet said, to be the ones we've been waiting for. We've got to be that light to uplift, to bring the connection, to weave that unity that we are together. So I'm gonna check in, and I want to make sure that you feel that, you know it, you live it, because that's who and what we are. So I want to thank you for being here as we have the help from our musicians today to remind us what we're going to do when we leave today, how we're going to be to open up and accept our divine inheritance. God bless you all. I love you all, and let's let the music take over.